Welcome to the second and final part of The Voice of Resilience, a story that began in silence, rose through heartbreak, and spoke into the lives of many. If you journeyed with Luisa Salvador in part 1, you already know her voice, steady, prayerful, and born of sorrow. You saw her face betrayal with grace, adapt to a new land, and rise as a voice for the unheard. But real life doesn't pause at victory. This continuation is about what comes after the awards, after the spotlight, after the world applauds. Here, Luisa will return home to the Philippines, for summer break, yes, but also to face the remnants of the love that wounded her. She will carry her children, again, through grief and confusion. And in time, she will become more than a survivor. She will become a builder of voices. This is her journey of return, reclamation, and quiet revolution. Thank you for continuing this walk with her. This is Enol. Chapter 14, Summer in the Islands. The voice that healed the world returned to the village that first broke her. The return flight to the Philippines was supposed to feel triumphant. After all, Luisa Salvador had done the unthinkable, raised her voice, changed lives, won awards. But as the plane descended over the rust-colored rooftops and rice fields of Bicol, she felt no triumph, just tenderness and caution. At the arrival gate, Salva waved wildly, holding a paper sign that said, "Welcome back, Pulitzer Queen." Below it, in small letters, P.S., "May utang ka pa sa halo-halo." Luisa laughed as soon as she saw it. Tears followed a second later. There was no red carpet, no media, just the scent of jeepney smoke and garlic rice wafting from the airport carinderia. And that was enough. They rode a tricycle home, the driver blasting Freddie Aguilar from a tinny speaker. Salvi updated her on barangay gossip like she was delivering the evening news. Si Aling Bebang may bagong manliligaw, jeepney driver daw, pangatlo na yon. Yung barbero, tumakbo ulit bilang kagawad. At teka lang, may chika ako pero huwag kang magalit. Luisa turned. What? Salve paused dramatically. Romy messaged me. He's here. Bumalik daw para kausapin ka ng maayos. Luisa's stomach dropped. She stared out the tricycle window as the familiar trees zipped past. Oh, she said. Romy showed up 2 nights later. He didn't knock, just called her name from the gate like it was 2005 again. He looked thinner, cleaner, that same sheepish grin. Luisa, he said, "Pwede ba tayong mag-usap?" She met him halfway down the driveway, not letting him pass the gate. Not yet. "I'm not here to fight," he added quickly. I want to start over. For the kids. For us. Us? Luisa studied his face. The same eyes, same tilt of the mouth. The same man who had once watched her cry beside a pile of unpaid bills and said nothing. The same man who slept on the couch while texting someone else under the table. But also the father of her children. Luisa, he said softly, I just want to make things right. For the kids. For us. Luisa stared at him across the iron gate, arms crossed, the mosquito coil burning slowly at her feet. She studied the face that once made her laugh under moonlit sorry signs, and later made her cry under kitchen lights that flickered with unpaid bills. Then she said, voice low and even, I'm not sure if I still want you back. Romy blinked, as if slapped by words he wasn't prepared to hear. I'm not saying this to punish you, she added. I'm saying it because this isn't a drama. This is real life, with real children, real wounds. Luisa, he stepped closer, gripping the gate. I've changed. She didn't move. Changed people don't declare it like a badge, Romy. They show it in silence, in showing up, in staying. I was stupid, he admitted. But I was scared. You were going places. I didn't know where I fit anymore. Luisa let the words hang, then answered quietly, You still don't. Then why are you even talking to me? He asked, voice rising slightly. Because I'm not bitter, she replied, but don't confuse that with being blind. I'm not sure if I still want you back, she said finally. I'm going back to Maryland with or without you. That's already decided. But you'll think about it? He asked. No, she said. I'll pray about it. That's different. Later that night, Salvi found her in the kitchen slicing green mangoes with surgical precision. "Why are you even considering it?" she asked. Luisa didn't look up. "Because I want the children to have peace." Salvi pulled up a chair. "Ate. Peace doesn't come from pretending someone changed. It comes from knowing you'll survive even if they haven't." Luisa placed the knife down. "I know." And she did. She wasn't trying to save Romy. She was just making sure that this time, her children wouldn't carry her silence like a second inheritance. The next day, Luisa gathered her kids on a video call. Pio wore a hoodie, Lucia was half off screen, and Maribel had headphones on. "Anak," Luisa began, "your father wants to come back with us." The silence was immediate. Then Pio said, "I thought you said he left you again." "He did," Luisa said, steady, "and I haven't forgotten that. But he says he wants to make things right, not just with me, with you." "I don't trust him," Lucia said flatly. "Me neither," Maribel added, "but I miss the idea of him." Luisa nodded. "You're allowed to feel that. I just need to know we're a unit. If I let him come back, it's not because he asked, it's because we agreed." They were quiet again. Then Pio said, "You're the one who's there, Mama. If you can look him in the face and still have peace, then okay." "Thank you," Luisa whispered. But she knew peace wasn't in Romy's face. It was in hers. Chapter 15. The Bargain of Forgiveness. Not all forgiveness is an open door. Sometimes it's just the key that sets you free. It was 3 days before her flight back to Maryland when Luisa met Romy again, this time on neutral ground, the old parish garden at the Basilica Church. She had chosen the place intentionally, not because it was romantic, but because it was real. The paint on the benches was chipped. The holy statues leaned slightly like they were eavesdropping. And still, people came here to pray. Romy sat waiting with a plastic bag dangling from his hand like a peace offering. Inside, one piece of day-old buko pie wrapped in tissue paper that looked suspiciously recycled from a wedding invitation. "I thought you liked this," he said awkwardly. "I did, before I found out you were slicing hearts, not just pie," Luisa replied dryly. He winced. "Okay, deserved that." She didn't sit right away. Instead, she walked slowly toward the statue of Our Lady, eyes lingering on the small votive candles at her feet. "I'm not bringing you back for love," she said finally. Romy blinked. "What?" "I'm not bringing you back for a second chance, or because I believe you've changed, or because I'm lonely. I'm bringing you back because the children need to see you. They need closure, they need clarity, and I need peace." "So, you don't believe I've changed?" Luisa finally sat across from him, folding her hands calmly. "I believe you're afraid of being left behind," she said. "And afraid men sometimes look like repentant ones. That's not the same as transformation. So don't say it, just prove it." Romy looked down at the pie in his lap, like it might answer for him. "I want to be part of their lives again." Then show up, without expectations, without manipulation, no promises, just presence. "And us?" he asked. "Is there still an us?" Luisa smiled, but it wasn't romantic. "There's a co-parenting contract, a shared Wi-Fi, and a funeral plan with both our names on it. That's the only us I can guarantee." "Luisa, I never wanted to lose you." "Then you should have fought for me before I had to learn to fight for myself." She stood up. "I'll see you on the plane. Row 22A, window seat. Don't sit beside me unless turbulence throws you there." Back at home, Salvi was waiting with a bottle of Coke and a full commentary. "So, nagpakita ba ng power tears? Gumanap ba ng nagbago na ako monologue?" "He brought buko pie," Luisa said. "Buko pie? That's it? Hindi man lang sapin-sapin? Alam mo, pag ako ang iniwan, kahit lechon dapat yan sa sorry gift basket." They both laughed, because if they didn't, they'd cry. They flew back to Maryland on the same flight, but in separate rows. Luisa took the window seat. Romy sat 5 rows behind her beside an overly chatty woman from Ohio who kept asking if he was a Filipino prince. Luisa prayed the glorious mysteries while the seatbelt sign blinked overhead. Not for Romy. For strength. For mercy that didn't make her a doormat. Halfway through the flight, a folded note appeared on her tray table. Thank you for letting me come. I'll stay in the basement until I find a place. I'll try to do better. I don't deserve this chance, but thank you. Luisa tucked the note into her carry-on between a packet of instant coffee and her devotional draft manuscript. She didn't reply. Mercy doesn't always need punctuation. Back in Maryland, the tension arrived before the jet lag wore off. Lucia slammed her bedroom door with the efficiency of a K-drama heroine. P.O. didn't speak at all, just muttered, "We'll see," and went back to his coding. Maribel hugged her father at the airport with all the warmth of a mildly defrosted spring roll. Don't waste it, she said simply. Romy took the basement room, as agreed. Luisa made no space in her bedroom. The only shared thing between them now was the thermostat, and even that was up for negotiation. 3 days later, Luisa stood in room 205 at Gracewood. The students returned with a mix of jet lag, attitude, and TikTok catchphrases. On her desk sat a handmade card that read, Ms. Salvador, we missed your stories. Do we get to cry again this year? Alan passed by her door. Hey, he said. Good summer? Luisa raised an eyebrow. Define good. He laughed. Survivable? That's more accurate. He leaned slightly on the door frame. Well, it's good to have your voice back. She smiled, tired but whole. It never really left. Chapter 16. Homebound Again. Sometimes the hardest place to return to is the one you never truly left. 2 weeks after returning to Maryland, Luisa found herself standing at the stove in her modest kitchen, stirring sinigang while checking her Google Calendar with the other hand. She was officially back. Back to teaching at Gracewood, back to early morning bus stops, back to packed lunches, mismatched socks, and laundry that multiplied like rabbits. But something had shifted. Not just in her, but in the house. Romy was downstairs, pretending to be invisible. The kids were upstairs, pretending he didn't exist. Maribel had become the diplomatic middle child, even though she was the eldest. She was already in her second year at University of Maryland, studying nursing, organizing her siblings' schedules, and emotionally parenting her own parents. Again. Lucia, 15 and stubborn as a traffic jam, had perfected the teenage eye roll. Every time Romy spoke, she replied in one of two ways. K. You're not the boss of me. And P.O. had gone quiet. The boy who used to ask questions about everything, space, stars, scripture, now asked nothing. He spent hours on his laptop coding something he refused to explain, headphones on, hoodie up, as if building a wall made of Python code and EDM playlists. One night, Luisa found P.O. still awake at 2 a.m., eyes glued to his screen. She gently tapped his shoulder. You're going to fry your brain, Anak. He flinched. Sorry, Ma, just trying to finish this AI model. She smiled. You're 15. That sentence shouldn't even make sense. It's for a scholarship thing. I'm teaching myself machine learning. Luisa sat beside him, quietly impressed. You okay? She asked. I don't know, he shrugged. I guess I just want to be someone who understands things. Algorithms make more sense than people. She wrapped her arm around him. Even algorithms can surprise you, Anak, but they won't hug you back. He leaned into her for the first time in weeks. I wished Papa never came back. Luisa nodded. Me too sometimes. But you know what I've learned? We don't always choose the storm, but we can build better roofs. Meanwhile, Romy tried. He really did. He packed Lucia's lunch one morning. She threw it out. He offered to take Maribel to the grocery. She sent him a list via text and said, just leave the bag at the door. He asked P.O. about his coding. P.O. said it's proprietary. Romy slept in the basement, but the emotional floor was even lower. He began spending more time out of the house. Job interviews, he said. One night, he came home late smelling faintly of perfume and hospital antiseptic. Luisa didn't ask. She didn't need to. He wasn't cheating again. Not yet, but he was wandering. Salve called that weekend. Her voice came through the speaker like the scent of garlic rice and unsolicited wisdom. Ate, I saw his new Facebook post. What now? Luisa sighed, folding laundry. He's in a photo, with a nurse, in Maryland. May caption, "Some blessings come in scrubs." Luisa paused, mid-fold. "I'm not surprised. You're not mad?" "I'm tired," she said, "and maybe finally free." At church the next Sunday, Alan sat beside her during the final hymn. They didn't speak. They just sang, "Make me a channel of your peace." After the Mass, Alan turned to her. "You look different." "Older?" "No, stronger." She smiled. "Same thing sometimes." That night, Luisa sat at her desk, opened her journal, and wrote, "Forgiveness is not letting someone back in. It's letting yourself out." Then she opened a fresh Word document and typed the title of her new book. She still stood, Voices of Women Who Refuse to Stay Silent. Chapter 17. The Noise of Rebellion. Some people burn bridges, others quietly remove the planks, one betrayal at a time. The house was louder now, not with shouting, but with tension. The kind of noise that comes from slammed doors, heavy silences, and footsteps that intentionally avoided one another. Lucia had stopped talking at dinner. Pio only emerged to raid the fridge and vanish again like a hoodie-wearing ghost. Maribel was trying to hold it all together with her clinical calm and coffee addiction. And Romy? He was getting better at lying. Luisa knew something was wrong the day Pio snapped at her over a bowl of sopas. "Can you please just stop acting like this is normal?" "What do you mean, anak?" she asked, startled. "He lives in our basement," Pio said sharply, "like some sitcom character with a dark backstory. Are we supposed to just, what, pretend we're one happy Filipino family in America?" "Pio, he left us, and you let him back in. For what?" Across the table, Lucia pushed her food away. "I told you, Ma, this is a mistake." "Lucia, not now." "When then?" she flared. "When he ruins Rose's life too?" Luisa's stomach dropped. "Excuse me?" Lucia stood. "Oh, please, everyone at school already knows. Rose, the nurse he's volunteering with, she's undocumented, and she thinks he's going to fix that for her." Maribel, ever composed, looked up from her laptop. "Wait, what?" "He told her," Lucia said, glaring, "that he's a U.S. citizen. She's already planning how she'll get her green card." Luisa's hands trembled, not from shock, but from confirmation. She'd suspected something. The late nights, the strange perfume, the fake job interviews. But this was reckless even for Romy. That night, while the children slept, Luisa opened her laptop and quietly opened a new Google Drive folder. Romy, evidence, screenshots, chat logs, texts she'd forwarded to herself, a voicemail from an anonymous number, photos Lucia had secretly taken of Romy picking Rose up outside her clinic. She filed for divorce the next morning. No tears, no scene, just a signature. A lawyer's nod, and a soft exhale she'd been holding in for 15 years. Romy tried to talk to her the moment he found out. "Luisa, you can't do this. You're the only one who can sponsor me. You know that. You want me deported?" Luisa looked him in the eye. "You lied to her, you lied to me, and you're lying to immigration." "Rose needs me," he said. "Then go to her. Maybe you can raise the baby in the Philippines together." Romy froze. "You know, she doesn't even know the truth yet," Luisa said quietly. "But she will." The blow-up came fast. Rose showed up outside their house 2 days later, crying, yelling, pregnant. "You told me you were a citizen," she screamed. Romy tried to calm her down, glancing nervously at the neighbors. "Rose, babe, just let me explain." "Explain? You lied to me. You said you could marry me and file papers. I gave up everything. Do you know what I risked being with you?" The children watched from the upstairs window in horrified silence. Luisa, arms crossed, didn't intervene. She just watched it unfold like a soap opera she never wanted to star in. "You know what hurts most?" Rose shouted, voice cracking. "I thought you were my chance at a life without fear. You were just another fraud." Then she got into the waiting Uber and slammed the door. The next morning, Romy packed his things. Not because he wanted to, because he had no choice. His dependent visa was tied to Luisa, and Luisa had officially cut the cord. Where will you go? Pio asked him, arms crossed in the doorway. Home, Romy muttered, not meeting his son's eyes. You were already home. You just didn't know how to act like it. Lucia didn't say goodbye. Maribel handed him a sealed envelope. Prenatal vitamins. For her. You should at least be decent enough to help. Luisa said nothing as he walked out. She just closed the door behind him, then locked it. Twice. Later that week in therapy, Pio finally opened up. I keep coding because it's the only thing that obeys rules. Life doesn't. Lucia cried when her favorite teacher assigned an essay about forgiveness. I can't write about something I don't believe in, she whispered. Maribel broke down at the university hospital on her first night shift. I don't want to see another pregnant patient for a week, she told her attending, eyes red. Luisa, meanwhile, was writing again. Her new book had a working subtitle, The Strong, the Silent, and the Survivors. Stories of women who knew when to let go. At the kitchen table, under soft lighting, Luisa gathered her 3 children. I want you to know something, she said. None of what happened was your fault. None of it means you're broken. Lucia looked away. Pio kept fiddling with his bracelet. Maribel smiled faintly. You didn't fail, Ma, she said. You fought. That's why we're still standing. Luisa reached out and held all 3 of their hands at once. Then let's keep standing, even if we're a little bent. They laughed, finally, because sometimes survival sounds like laughter through tears, and sometimes the loudest rebellion is the decision to heal. Chapter 18. The Voice of the Daughter. It's one thing to inherit a legacy. It's another to decide what to do with it. Lucia had never wanted to be like her mother, not because she didn't admire her, she did, deeply, but because being like Luisa meant being strong all the time. It meant forgiving too much, crying too little, and smiling even when your heart was hemorrhaging. Lucia wasn't wired that way. She wanted truth in loud volumes. She wanted justice in capital letters. She wanted to scream at the world that not everything had to be endured quietly. The day after Romy left for good, Lucia skipped school. She told Maribel she had a sore throat, which was half true. Her voice felt stuck, her chest heavy. Instead, she spent the morning in the attic with a box labeled Elle's old stuff. Half her childhood drawings, a few Barbies missing shoes, and the pink diary she hadn't touched since she was 10. Inside, she found an entry that stopped her cold. Today, Papa said he'd take me to the carnival, but he didn't. He said sorry and bought me ice cream instead. Mama said people break promises sometimes, but they don't always mean to. I think maybe Papa means to. She read it 5 times. Then she ripped the page out and burned it in a ceramic bowl. The ashes curled like secrets finally spoken. That afternoon, she found her mother grading papers in the living room. Can I ask you something, Ma? Luisa looked up. Of course. Why did you stay so long? Luisa didn't flinch. Because I was trying to fix something I didn't break. That's not fair, Lucia whispered. To you. I know, Luisa said. But for years, I thought it was love. Lucia sat beside her, fiddling with a pen. And now? Now I know better. They were quiet for a while. Then Lucia said, I think I want to write something. A poem? No, a speech, about what it's like being a girl watching her mother survive. Luisa turned to face her. What for? There's this spoken word competition. I want to join. Luisa's eyes softened. Then speak, Anak. Speak loud. Speak true. I'll be in the front row. A week later, Lucia stood on a small stage at the local youth center, palms sweating, heart racing. Maribel sat on one side of the room with a stethoscope around her neck, fresh from her hospital rotation. Pio sat on the other side, hoodie down for once, notebook in hand. And Luisa stood in the back, hand over her mouth, not to hide emotion, but to catch it before it spilled too soon. Lucia stepped up to the mic and began. They told me my mother was too soft, that she stayed too long, forgave too much, kept the door open when she should have built a wall. But I saw her arms, tired from holding 3 children through the storm. I saw her eyes, scanning fine print to protect what was ours. I saw her heart, fractured but still beating loyalty, and I saw her leave, not because she stopped loving, but because she started loving herself too. So don't tell me soft is weak. Don't tell me silence is surrender. Don't tell me survival isn't strength. Because I am the daughter of resilience, and I speak now, because she once couldn't. The room erupted. Lucia bowed, blinking back tears, as Luisa clapped the loudest in the room. That night, back at home, Luisa stuck a new note on the refrigerator beside the old ones. It read, "One voice raised in truth can shake a whole house of lies." Lucia saw it and smiled. "That's me, isn't it?" Luisa nodded. "It's all of us, Anak. One voice at a time." Chapter 19. A Room of Her Own. There comes a moment when healing becomes a gift, not just for yourself, but for others still in the storm. Luisa hadn't planned to write a book. It began as journal entries, then turned into letters to women she met in grief support groups. Eventually, it became something bigger, something that asked to be spoken, not just scribbled in secret. The working title, She Still Stood, Voices of Women Who Refused to Stay Silent. She wrote in the early mornings, while the house was still quiet. She wrote in the car during Pio's robotics practice, and in the lobby of the hospital while waiting for Maribel's night shift to end. Sometimes she even wrote between classes at Gracewood International, sipping lukewarm coffee in the teacher's lounge, with Alan reading quietly across from her. She never wrote without saying a Hail Mary first. He never interrupted. But once, after she sighed over a draft, he looked up and said, "Don't edit your scars out, they're part of the story." It was Alan, in fact, who first said the words that would change her trajectory. "You know, Luisa, this isn't just a book, it's a movement." "It's just words," she replied. "So was the Declaration of Independence," he said with a shrug, "and the Magnificat, and José Rizal's letters." She stared at him. "You think I could do something with this?" "I think you already are." A month later, she submitted an excerpt to an international conference on women's advocacy and migration, held in New York. She didn't expect anything. So when the acceptance letter came, with a personal invitation to speak on a panel about immigrant mothers, Luisa dropped her mug of coffee. "Ma, are you okay?" Pio shouted from upstairs. I'm okay, Anak. I just spilled my coffee." But inside, something else had poured over her. Disbelief, hope, fire. That night she texted Salve, "Pray with me, huh? Our rosaries are going places." The day of the conference, she wore a simple white blouse and a blue skirt. Nothing fancy, but her lanyard said, "Speaker, Luisa Salvador, author and educator." She sat on stage beside lawyers, professors, and a senator from Canada. When it was her turn to speak, she told the story of a woman who once stayed too long in a marriage, thinking love meant self-erasure. A woman who thought silence was safety, and how that same woman learned to raise her voice, not out of rage, but out of mercy. "I am here," Luisa said, "not because I have all the answers, but because I have survived long enough to ask better questions and listen to those still struggling to answer them." The crowd rose to their feet. Afterward, in the hallway, a young woman approached her. "Ma'am," she said in a thick accent, "I'm undocumented. I haven't seen my children in 3 years. But hearing you today..." She choked up. "I think maybe I can make it a little longer." Luisa hugged her, holding her as if they shared the same heartbeat. Because in that moment, they did. That night in her hotel room, Luisa looked around the space. One bed, one desk, one window with a view of the Hudson River. And she realized she finally had a room of her own, not just in New York, but in life. A room where no one shouted her down. A room where she could write, breathe, exist. A room where her voice could grow. Back in Maryland, Lucia sent her a text. "I watched your speech online. You're famous now, LOL. Don't forget us little people." Luisa smiled. "Never," she replied. "You're the reason I found my voice." Then she opened her laptop, took a deep breath, kissed her rosary, and began typing the final chapter of her book. Chapter 20. When Mercy Becomes Muscle. Mercy isn't the absence of anger. It's the decision to build instead of break. Luisa never dreamed of becoming anyone's role model. She just wanted peace. But peace, she had learned, is not passive. It requires muscle. Not the kind born in gyms, but the kind forged through prayer, pain, and choosing not to collapse. After her New York speech went viral, well, viral in the way that teachers and OFW moms defined it, Luisa's inbox filled with stories. One woman from Dubai wrote, "My husband hasn't let me speak to my own family in 2 years, but your words reminded me I still exist." A former student from Gracewood sent a private message. "Ma'am, I never told anyone before, but my stepfather hurt me. Seeing you on stage helped me tell my mom." And from Salva, naturally, "Ate, do you have a fan club yet? Because I already printed stickers." Luisa laughed at that one. But the next message gave her pause. It was from a women's shelter in Baltimore. "Would you consider speaking at our community event next month? Many of the women here are immigrants, some survivors of domestic violence. We think your story could give them hope." She closed the laptop slowly, hands instinctively reaching for the rosary beads in her bag. Before replying, she whispered a Hail Mary under her breath. This was no longer just about her healing. At the shelter, Luisa stood in a circle of 15 women. No lights, no microphones, no live stream. Just folding chairs, a flickering air conditioner, and eyes that carried centuries of silence. She didn't give a speech. She just shared what it felt like to wake up one day and realize you were not crazy. You were just manipulated. Not overreacting. You were finally reacting to injustice. Not too emotional. You were finally safe enough to feel. One woman began to cry. Another began to write. Someone whispered, "Thank you." When Luisa stepped outside, her hands were shaking, but not from fear, from conviction. A few days later, Alan caught up with her after school, holding a paper coffee cup and looking thoughtful. "Hey," he said, "you looked like someone who just rewired the entire universe during class today." "I taught vocabulary using a poem about surviving," she smiled. "Half of them cried. The other half rewrote the ending." Then she added more seriously, "I spoke at a women's shelter last weekend." Alan blinked. "Luisa, that's incredible." "It felt holy," she whispered. "Maybe that's your new classroom," he said gently, beyond grammar and sentence structure. The same week, Gracewood's principal asked to see her. She panicked briefly, wondering if a parent had complained again about the recent headlines. But it was the opposite. "Luisa," the principal said, "we'd like you to lead our new Women's Empowerment and Leadership elective next semester." I teach ESL. "And healing," he smiled. "Apparently you're very good at both." She hesitated, then offered, "You know, the writing project we did last year, it wasn't part of the ESL curriculum. It started during homeroom, just paper and honesty. I didn't grade their grammar, I just let them write their truth. Some of them had never been heard before." The principal nodded. "That's exactly what this program needs." That night she told the kids over dinner. Maribel nearly dropped her fork. "Ma, that's amazing." Lucia nodded. "You better assign homework about Gloria Steinem." Pio, without looking up from his laptop, said, "Will your course include lessons in data ethics and gender bias in AI models?" Luisa blinked. "It might now." They all laughed. Later that evening, while folding laundry, she paused to text Salve, "I think I'm turning into someone I once prayed for." Salve replied with a single voice note. It was just the sound of her crying, then giggling, then saying, "8, you're not just surviving, you're leading." Mercy had once meant putting up with everything. Now mercy meant saying no to what broke her, saying yes to who she was becoming, forgiving herself for not leaving sooner, and using her voice so others wouldn't have to wait as long. This was mercy with muscle, mercy that spoke, mercy that marched, mercy that taught. And Luisa, for the first time in her life, felt unshakable. Chapter 21, Legacy in the Making. Some people inherit money, others inherit silence. Luisa decided her children would inherit neither. She woke up that Sunday with an idea that wouldn't go away. A book, not about herself, but about women like her. Mothers, immigrants, teachers, caregivers. Survivors not of one dramatic moment, but of thousands of quiet humiliations. the ones who packed sandwiches while hiding bruises, the ones who smiled at PTA meetings with invisible scars under their sleeves. Luisa opened her laptop, not with trembling hands, but with resolve. The working title came fast: Strong Even When Silent, Stories of Women Who Stayed Too Long. Then eventually just Strong Even When Silent. It wasn't meant to be a bestseller, it was meant to be a mirror. She reached out to friends, fellow educators, old classmates, even Salve's friends, anyone who had lived through something and come out the other side with their soul intact. The stories poured in like monsoon rain. Anonymous essays, poems with tear stains. One woman mailed a handwritten letter on the back of an old church bulletin. Luisa read each one, cried with most, wrote a few of her own. She didn't edit much. She didn't need to. Truth doesn't require polish, just light. It was Pio who helped her turn the collection into a manuscript. I formatted the chapters, added metadata, and set up the online platform, he said casually over dinner. You're welcome, Mom. Metadata? You're basically a digital prophet now. Lucia created the cover artwork, a simple image of two bare feet walking through shards of glass. Maribel offered to handle outreach with bookstores and women's centers. I already spoke to my ethics professor, she said. He said your book should be part of the curriculum. I haven't even published it yet. That's your problem, Ma, Maribel said. You underestimate your own thunder. A few weeks later, Luisa held the first proof copy in her hands. It smelled like paper and redemption. She placed it gently on her nightstand, next to her rosary, and a framed photo of her children. Before bed, she whispered aloud, "This is what the enemy tried to bury." The book didn't make headlines, but it made a dent. One of the women's centers she had once spoken at invited her to launch it during their Community Awareness Week. The event was packed. One attendee came up to her after and said, "I was going to go back to him today. After reading your story, I didn't." Luisa smiled. She'd spent years wondering if her pain had meaning. Now she didn't wonder anymore. That spring, she was invited to speak at an International Educators Summit in Toronto. Topic: Trauma-aware classrooms and the role of teacher storytellers. Alan teased her over lunch at school. "Look at you, jet-setting author." "I still grade grammar quizzes, Alan. Don't inflate my ego." But he saw it. The way she walked taller now. The way she no longer apologized for her own strength. As the plane lifted off from Baltimore, heading to Toronto, Luisa looked out the window and whispered her usual prayer. For the women who haven't spoken yet. For the ones who think they're alone. For the girls watching their mothers and wondering if this is all life will be. And in her heart, she heard Salva's voice reply, "Write louder, Ate. They're listening now." Chapter 22. A Place to Land. Every survivor needs two things, a way out and a place to land. The Toronto summit was over, but Luisa stayed an extra day, not for sightseeing, not for shopping, just to breathe. She wandered a small park near the hotel, coffee in hand, watching children chase pigeons and snow melt drip from pine branches. For the first time in years, she wasn't moving to escape something. She was moving toward something. Her phone buzzed, a voice message from Salve. "Ate, I saw your photo in the summit brochure. Why does your smile look like you just threw Romy's clothes into a fire pit? I love it." Luisa grinned, then sent her a photo of the nearby pond. "This is my view right now. I feel still for the first time." Salve replied instantly. "Still is good. Still means your soul's not hiding anymore." That afternoon, Luisa sat by the window of a small bookstore cafe and reread the last essay in her own book. It was one she had almost removed. It read, "The hardest part of abuse isn't leaving. It's believing that the world still has soft places, that you are not too complicated to be loved, that your story can be ugly and you can still become beautiful." She closed the book and whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, just upward. Back in Maryland, the kids greeted her like a mini rock star. Lucia had made a banner, "Welcome home, Toronto champion." Pio had tracked her flight with an app and had way too much data about wind speed and delays. Maribel hugged her like she was trying to put all the unspoken things into one embrace. "Mom," she said, "I'm proud of who you're becoming." "I'm still becoming?" Luisa teased. "Yup, and the plot twist is great." They all laughed. It felt like family again. Later that night, Luisa went out to the small backyard. The grass needed trimming, the fence leaned, but it was theirs. She looked up at the stars and remembered something her grandmother once said. The strongest roots grow in the harshest storms. She had spent years dangling, gripping, waiting for someone to pull her in. Now she was planting something. Her voice, her story, her family, and maybe, just maybe, herself. Inside, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Salve. "I can't believe we're both living our dreams, Ate. Mine just has more karaoke." Luisa replied with a selfie, tired eyes, gentle smile, tea in hand. "Mine has more essays, but I'll sing with you soon." That night, before bed, she prayed again. Not just for her own strength, but for every woman still in transit, every daughter still unsure, every son watching, learning what love should not look like. Chapter 23, The Math of Moving On. Healing doesn't come in leaps, it comes in centimeters, until one day you realize you've arrived. Luisa stood at the whiteboard in room 3B of Gracewood International School, holding a blue dry erase marker and a warm mug of ginger tea. Today's ESL lesson was supposed to be on transition words, but her students were still buzzing about the International Summit, some of them having seen clips of her speech online. "Miss Luisa," one of the 10th grade girls said, "is it true you were on stage with a Nobel Prize winner?" "Yes," Luisa smiled, "and she borrowed my pen." Gasps, applause, a dramatic, "Oh my God, you're famous." "Not famous," Luisa said, turning to the board. "Just faithful." After class, she went to her desk and pulled out her rosary. It was the old one, beads slightly faded, one small knot where a mystery bead had fallen off years ago. She closed her eyes and whispered a memorare. Mama Mary had always been her silent companion. Through every visa renewal, every lie Romy told, every night she cried in silence, Mama Mary had been the one she clung to. No fiery sermons, just the still, soft echo. Do whatever he tells you. That was her compass. Later that week, her students stayed after class again. 2 girls who barely spoke the first semester now lingered near the bookshelf. "Miss, we read your book. How did you—" "Lucia posted about it. Your daughter." "Ah," Luisa chuckled. "That social media team of mine." The girls sat down and one began to tear up. "My mom's in a shelter right now. I didn't think teachers understood things like that." Luisa knelt beside them. "We don't always talk about it," she said, "but some of us lived it." They cried quietly. She didn't rush them. When they finally stood to leave, one girl hugged her. "You make this school feel like a home." Luisa whispered, "You make this job feel like a calling." That night, back at home, she sat beside her little backyard altar, just a small wooden cross, a statue of the Blessed Mother, and a few candles. The house was quiet. Maribel was on a night shift. Lucia was studying for her exams. Pio was programming something she could neither understand nor pronounce. She opened her prayer journal and wrote, "Today, I didn't teach verbs. I taught that pain has a voice, that even the voiceless can be heard, that Mama Mary never left my side, not once. And maybe she's walking my students home too." Before she slept, she messaged Salvi, "I think I'm finally doing the math of moving on." Salvi replied with a laughing emoji and, 8, just make sure your equations still include joy." Luisa smiled, kissed the rosary under her pillow, and whispered, "For the ones still finding X in their own stories, may they know they're never solving it alone." Chapter 24, 3 Lights, 1 Flame. You don't need to be daughters to be your mother's legacy. You just need to carry the fire she lit. The house was unusually quiet for a Friday. Maribel was in her scrubs, fresh from her nursing classes at the University of Maryland. Lucia had just come home from tutoring middle schoolers at church. Pio, hoodie up, was tinkering with a Python script in the living room like it owed him an apology. Luisa watched them from the kitchen doorway, heart swelling and aching at once. Here are her children. Not perfect, but purposeful. "Ma," Lucia called, "can I talk to you about something?" They sat at the kitchen table, steaming mugs between them. I think I want to teach. Luisa blinked. Really? I don't want to just survive anymore. I want to help others understand the pain, help them name it, move past it. Like you saw me do? Luisa asked, eyes misting. Lucia nodded. But I'll do it my way, through stories, through books. You taught through grammar. I want to teach through voices. Luisa reached out and squeezed her hand. Whatever way you choose, you're already a teacher. Later, Maribel walked in, flipping through notes on ethical dilemmas in patient care. One of my patients today asked if I believed in second chances, she said almost to herself. What did you say? Luisa asked. I told him I lived with a woman who proved they were real, but that we get to choose what kind of second chance we accept. Pio entered the room then, earbuds half dangling, and sat across from them. Did you know, he said, that most AI models are biased because of incomplete data? The girls blinked. Okay, Maribel said slowly. I'm training one to predict language learning gaps in ESL students, he continued. I want to use tech to give disadvantaged kids a fair shot. Lucia grinned. Look at you, using your code for justice. Well, Pio shrugged, someone in this family has to make money. They all laughed. Luisa looked at them, not just as a mother, but as a witness. 3 lives shaped by their storms. 3 lights burning differently. 1 flame passed between them. She thought of all the nights she'd cried into her rosary, whispering to Mama Mary, just let them come through this. Let them find their way. Let them forgive me for what I couldn't protect them from. And now, they were finding their way. Not in spite of her pain, but because they saw how she walked through it. That night, they prayed the rosary together. Not because it was a rule, because it was their rhythm. Pio led the 2nd decade, his voice quiet but steady. Lucia lit the candle. Maribel held her mother's hand. Afterward, Luisa texted Salva. They're becoming whole, each in their own way. I think I'm witnessing my prayers come true. Salve replied, Ate, you didn't just raise kids, you raised a revolution. Luisa smiled. She looked at the candle still flickering on their makeshift altar and whispered, Thank you for letting me see the fruit. Thank you for the fire I didn't know I had to pass on. Chapter 25, The Fire, the Flight, and the Future. You don't rebuild the future by erasing the past. You build it by choosing what still matters, and what you're finally ready to burn. It started with a phone call, not a dramatic one. Just the kind that pulls at a corner of your peace until the whole tapestry comes loose. The landlord of their old storage unit in Laurel, Maryland, had finally found the number attached to the account. Miss Salvador, ma'am. I'm calling about Unit 14B. There was a short circuit. Small fire. Your unit was affected. I'm really sorry. Luisa barely remembered what was in there. Old documents. Some of Romy's boxed up things she couldn't throw away back then. Ella's letters, maybe. Some school papers. Wedding photos, sealed in an old green plastic tub. She drove there the next morning with Alan. You don't have to come, she had said. I know, he replied, getting in the passenger seat anyway. The place smelled like ash and wet cement. The door to 14B was half melted, the storage manager standing beside it with a clipboard and apologetic eyes. Inside, it was a mix of blackened plastic, scorched folders, and one lone chair that somehow survived. Romy's favorite one. Luisa stepped inside slowly, carefully avoiding the water puddles. She found a warped envelope with her name on it. Inside, one photograph, faded but intact, their wedding day. She stared at it for a long moment. Do you want to keep it? Alan asked gently. Luisa didn't answer. She reached into her bag instead, pulled out her rosary, whispered a short prayer, kissed it, then put it back. The scent of smoke still lingered in the air as she whispered, Hail Mary, full of grace. Alan stood quietly beside her. She finished the 5th decade, looked at the photo one last time, and set it down in the blackened bin. No, she said, I don't need to keep it anymore. That night, Luisa sat with her children and told them the truth, not just about the fire, about the past, I kept a lot of things from you. I thought I was protecting you, she said. But sometimes we protect our children from the storm and forget they're already wet. Maribel reached for her hand. Lucia leaned in, head on her shoulder. Pio nodded, his quiet presence louder than any words. We know, Ma, Lucia said softly. You never needed to be perfect, just present. Later, Luisa finally booked the flight she'd been postponing for years. Back to the Philippines, just for a week, to speak at a women's retreat in Laguna, to see Salva, to walk the street where she first learned what silence cost her. She hadn't told anyone yet, not even Alan. That night, she sent a voice message to Salve. I'm coming home for a visit, and I'm not bringing baggage, literal or emotional. Salve replied with her usual mischief. About time. I'm cleaning the karaoke mic just for you. Also, bring Chalknut. On the plane, Luisa clutched her rosary and watched the clouds shift like stories. A stewardess paused beside her. Are you okay, ma'am? Yes, Luisa smiled, just thinking how strange it is to be flying back, not to escape, but to return stronger. Back in Maryland, a candle flickered on the altar table. 3 framed photos sat beside it, one of her children, one of Mama Mary, and one of Luisa herself speaking into a microphone with her eyes full of conviction. The fire may have taken the old photos, but it could not take her voice. Not anymore. Chapter 26, A Room Full of Women. You can spend a lifetime being silenced, but the day you choose to speak, others find their voices too. The retreat center in Laguna was not grand. Its walls were painted the color of old lace, and the roof creaked every time a bird landed. But it was nestled between trees that smelled of memory, molave and mango, and something that reminded Luisa of her childhood walks to Mass. She had been invited to speak at the annual Lakas, Kababaihan sa Gitna ng Bagyo Retreat, Women in the Eye of the Storm. The flyer had listed her title as Luisa Salvador, author, educator, advocate. But to most of the women sitting in the bamboo chairs, she was simply Ate Luisa. Before she stepped on stage, she took a deep breath. In her pocket was a tiny rosary. In her bag, a scarf from Maribel, a printed poem from Lucia, and a hand-coded affirmation from Pio. Mom, you are a system of resilience. She smiled at that last one. Lord, she whispered, multiply the little I offer today. Let it be enough. Her speech wasn't long. She didn't read from a script. She simply told the truth. I stayed for too long. I believed I was the problem. I forgot how to ask for help. But someone, my sister, a student, my own daughter, kept reminding me that I was still worth saving. The room was silent, except for the occasional sniffle. I am not healed. I am healing. And if my voice shakes while I tell this, let it shake. I am proof that being broken is not the end. It's the beginning of building differently. After she spoke, the women lined up. One whispered, that was my story too. Another said, my daughter needed to hear this. An older woman pressed her forehead to Luisa's shoulder and wept. I left after 34 years, she whispered. Today, I feel brave for the first time. Luisa held each hand, hugged each trembling body, and silently offered every tear back to Mama Mary. That night, Salvi took her to a carinderia by the lake. They ordered grilled bangus, pancit, and halo. You still have your teacher voice, Salve teased, but you cry more now. Only because I know the price of silence. They sat in companionable quiet until Salve asked, so what now, Ate? Luisa looked out at the lake. Now I go home and build. The next morning, the retreat organizer gave Luisa a simple token, a framed quote, hand-painted by one of the survivors. You are not just a survivor, you are a spark, and we are lighting our candles from you. Luisa tucked it into her bag beside her rosary. When she boarded her flight back to Maryland, she didn't feel heavy. She felt full, not with pain, but with possibility. Chapter 27, The Invitation. Some doors don't open with a knock. They open because someone saw your light under the crack. Luisa returned to Maryland to an inbox overflowing with unread messages. Most were from students, friends, or readers of her book. But one stood out, an email with the subject line, "Your story, their stage." Sent from the International Council for Women in Crisis Education, ICWICE. She clicked, "Dear Ms. Salvador, we watched your keynote from the Lacas retreat. Your words struck something deeper than inspiration. They gave language to what so many survivors haven't yet said out loud. We are organizing our annual conference in Geneva this October. Curriculum of Courage, Women Rewriting the World. We'd be honored if you would join as a featured speaker. With deepest respect, Dr. Celeste Romero, Chair, ICWICE." Luisa stared at the screen, stunned. Geneva? Her? She reread the email, then again, and again. And then she did what she always did when the world overwhelmed her. She reached for her rosary. That night, she called Salva. "Guess who's going to Geneva?" she whispered. "Ikaw? Ikaw na naman?" "Ate, should I apply for your fan club presidency?" They both laughed. "I'm scared, Salve," Luisa admitted. "It's a global platform. Academics, policymakers." "Exactly, which means they need you the most. You speak in a way they remember, not in footnotes, in fire." At school, Alan noticed something different. "You're glowing," he said, handing her a coffee. "What happened? Someone buy you 10 kilos of chalk-nut?" Luisa smiled, the soft kind that carried a secret. Someone saw my story and gave it a stage." Alan looked at her like he was proud and maybe a little in awe. "You're going to be great. Don't forget us when you're on CNN." "You mean when you and I are co-writing my second book?" she teased. He held up his hands. "I'll just be the guy in the acknowledgments." Later that week, Luisa gathered her children. They sat on the couch, Maribel fresh from the hospital, Lucia with a book in hand, and Pio balancing a laptop on one knee. "I've been invited to speak in Geneva," she said. The kids blinked. "Switzerland? Geneva, Geneva? As in cheese and peace treaties?" Pio muttered. "Yes," she laughed. "I'll be gone for a week." Lucia was the first to smile. "Go, Mom. The world needs to hear what you've been telling us." Maribel nodded. "You always said healing should echo. Let it echo louder." Pio leaned back and simply said, "They chose the right person." That night, Luisa opened her journal. She wrote, "I don't want a platform for the sake of noise. I want one where truth becomes contagious, where women don't just clap, they rise. Mama Mary, walk with me. I am yours. And if you will, let my voice carry farther than I ever dreamed." Chapter 28, Geneva. The world doesn't change because perfect people speak. It changes because broken ones dare to. She had never seen so many flags in one room. The conference hall in Geneva was all glass and steel, polished and intimidating. It was a far cry from the bamboo chapel she once taught in during the summer storms of her childhood. And yet, standing backstage with her name printed neatly on the speaker's schedule, Luisa felt oddly calm. Her rosary was in her pocket. Her heels were just the right height to stand tall without trembling. Her message? Already prayed over. Before her turn, a speaker from South Sudan shared how war had torn her village apart, how she taught math under mango trees after the school was bombed. Luisa felt the tears well up. These weren't statistics. These were sisters. Then came a human rights advocate from Syria, then one from Mexico, one from Ukraine. Each story, a piece of a broken world stitched together by courage. When Luisa's name was called, there was a pause. The announcer said it softly, like a secret being trusted to the room. "Ms. Luisa Salvador, educator, survivor, voice for women and children." She stepped into the spotlight. "I came from a small town where women whispered pain into pillows, where we were taught that endurance was holiness and silence was a virtue." She paused. The room leaned in. But silence is not always sacred. Sometimes it's survival, and sometimes it's the slowest way to die. She told them about Maryland, about Gracewood, about her students whose stories broke her heart and healed it in the same breath. She told them about Romy, without venom, only clarity. She spoke about how systems fail women twice, once when they're hurt, and again when they're unheard. She ended not with applause in mind, but with conviction. We don't need saviors in capes. We need allies with ears. We don't need rescue. We need recognition. Let us stop asking women, "Why did you stay?" and instead ask the world, "Why did it make leaving so hard?" Silence followed. Then the room stood. Slowly at first, then wave after wave, ambassadors, students, survivors, activists. It wasn't applause, and it was recognition, it was resonance. After the panel, a young woman from Turkey approached her. "Your voice, it sounded like mine, but I didn't know I had one." Luisa hugged her. "You do, you always did. Sometimes it just takes another voice to wake ours up." Later that night in the hotel, Luisa sat by the window, overlooking Lake Geneva. She dialed a video call. Salve answered in pajamas, hair wrapped in a towel. "You were amazing," she beamed. "Even in bad Wi-Fi, you glowed." Luisa laughed. "It's the Holy Spirit's filter." They talked about nothing and everything. Before ending the call, Salve whispered, "Ate, you weren't just heard today, you were understood." Luisa hung up and knelt beside the bed. She whispered the glorious mysteries with quiet gratitude, her fingers threading the beads she'd once gripped through nights of weeping. Now she held them in peace. Chapter 29, The Return Home. She left to tell her story. She returned knowing it was never hers alone. The wheels of the plane touched down in Washington, D.C. with a soft thud, barely enough to wake the baby in the row across from her. But Luisa felt every inch of that landing in her chest. It was different now. The last time she landed here, it was with heartache, secret fears, and kids barely holding together. This time she carried no shame, no panic, only a small leather notebook filled with names of women she'd met, each one a mirror of her own strength. Alan picked her up at the airport with a cardboard sign that read, "Welcome back, Ma'am Geneva." Luisa laughed as she rolled her suitcase toward him. "You are ridiculous." "And proud," he grinned. "Very, very proud." He took her bag, but not her hand. That boundary still remained, gentle, respectful, unspoken. "The kids insisted on cooking dinner," he said as they walked toward the car. "Pio's trying to make pasta from scratch." "Lord, save us," Luisa murmured with a smile. He did ask ChatGPT to help. Then we're definitely doomed. Back home, the smell of garlic and overcooked onions greeted her like an old auntie. Lucia met her at the door, hugging her tightly. "You made us all cry, you know," she said, holding up her phone. "You were trending on teacher TikTok. I didn't even know that was a thing." Maribel had set the table, hospital badge still clipped to her collar. "We watched it as a family," she said. "Pio cried." "Did not," came a voice from the kitchen. "Did too," Luisa chuckled. "I missed this." "We missed you," they chorused. Over dinner, Luisa told them about the Turkish activist, the Syrian refugee-turned-writer, the widow from Brazil who said Luisa's speech made her return to university. She didn't glamorize it. She simply shared it. Pio finally spoke. "I think I want to build something like a platform or app where women from around the world can tell their stories safely, protected, anonymous if needed, but heard." "Like a digital support group?" Maribel asked. "With AI to detect harmful replies and boost helpful ones," he added. "Not social media. Something sacred." Luisa looked at her son, the one who used to barely speak in class, the one who retreated into screens after Romy left. Now he wanted to build a sanctuary. Her throat tightened. "Pio, that's beautiful." "You gave me the idea," he said without looking up. "You've been giving people a voice. I want to give them the room." That night, alone in her bedroom, Luisa unpacked her suitcase. At the bottom was a small velvet pouch. Inside, the medal of the Immaculate Conception she wore on her first day teaching. And a folded page torn from her journal, written weeks ago. "I want to believe healing can echo, that every woman who whispers her pain helps another shout her freedom." She folded it again and placed it under her pillow. Then she messaged Salva. "I'm home, but the work is only beginning." Salva replied in seconds. 8 The world is wide, but the fire started in you. Chapter 30. A Platform of Grace. She didn't wait for permission anymore. She gave it to others. The first community writing night was held in a borrowed church basement. It wasn't perfect. The sound system buzzed, the fans wheezed, and the coffee came from a dented thermos. But when the women stood up to read their stories, no one noticed. One woman read about leaving a controlling husband. Another shared how she taught herself to drive at 47. A teenage girl read a poem about growing up undocumented. And when the room broke into applause, raw, real applause, Luisa finally let herself believe. This was worth everything. The Grace and Grit project had grown faster than she expected. What began as a simple book of student stories had evolved into a platform for truth-telling, healing, and hope. Lucia handled logistics like a seasoned coordinator. Pio designed the website and developed a section for anonymous submissions. Maribel reached out to shelters and hospitals to share the stories with those who needed them most. And Luisa? She showed up. She taught writing workshops. She spoke at events. She prayed every night that the women walking through their own shadows would find light in the words. After the event, a quiet knock came at the side door of the church basement. It was Alan. "I caught the last reading," he said, stepping in with a half-smile. "You built something beautiful, Luisa." She didn't expect him, but she wasn't surprised. "It wasn't just me," she said, "but thank you." He held out a folded paper, an invitation to a regional educators' symposium. The theme, language, identity, and liberation. He had listed her as a co-panelist. "Only if you're ready to speak to a wider crowd," he said. She took the paper and smiled. "I think I stopped being afraid of ready a long time ago." Later that evening, over leftovers at home, Lucia casually mentioned Alan's visit. "He's nice," she said. "Supportive, low drama, high EQ." Maribel chimed in. "We're just saying, he shows up." Luisa raised an eyebrow. "You sound like matchmakers." "We're daughters. Same thing," Lucia smirked. But Luisa wasn't rushing. She had learned that some seasons are for surviving, some for speaking, and some, maybe, just maybe, for letting someone walk beside you. Quietly, respectfully, not to complete you, but to witness who you've become. Chapter 31. The Matchmakers. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. Sometimes it's just no longer carrying the weight alone. They sat around the dinner table, the kind Luisa used to dream about when she was alone. No shouting, no eggshells, just food and laughter layered with the warmth of family. Lucia brought her new vegan adobo experiment. Pio had roasted chicken in case the experiment failed. Maribel arrived late, still in her scrubs, hair tied in a messy bun. And then there was an extra chair. Luisa eyed it suspiciously. "Why are we setting 5 plates?" Lucia grinned. "Surprise guest." "Knock, knock." Luisa opened the door. Alan stood there with a bottle of mango juice and a sheepish smile. "I was told this was a dinner, and possibly an ambush." Dinner was warm, awkward, and entirely perfect in its imperfection. Alan recounted how he once accidentally sent a love poem to the school bulletin instead of a faculty memo. Pio asked him to explain literary symbolism, and whether he thought AI would ever write better love letters than humans. Lucia shot knowing glances across the table. Maribel raised her eyebrows every time Luisa laughed a little too long. After dessert, cassava cake and fruit salad, the room fell into a rare hush. Lucia broke it. "So, we were wondering, is this a thing?" Luisa blinked. "Is what a thing?" Pio jumped in, grinning. "You and Sir Alan. We approve. We just want to know if we should set extra plates from now on." Luisa laughed, nearly choking on her tea. Alan looked like a deer in headlights, holding his glass mid-air. "Wow," he said. "This escalated quickly." "We're serious, Ma," Maribel added, her voice softer now. "It's okay to start something new. We're okay." Luisa looked at her children, these brilliant, battle-tested souls, and felt something click into place. "I don't know what this is," she said honestly, "but I know I'm not afraid of it." Alan met her gaze. "And I'm in no rush. I'm just here." Lucia whispered to Maribel, "That's the most romantic thing I've ever heard." Later, after the dishes were cleared and Alan had gone, Luisa sat in her room, rosary in hand. She didn't ask for signs. She just whispered, "Mama Mary, if this is grace, let me not miss it." And in the quiet hum of the house she built, the healing she fought for, and the love that waited patiently outside her door, Luisa smiled. She wasn't broken, she wasn't rushed. She was just finally free. Chapter 32. The Legacy Letter. Some things are too precious to leave unsaid, even if they're not spoken aloud. Luisa had been thinking about the letter for months, not because she feared she wouldn't get to say goodbye, but because she had finally learned how powerful it was to leave clarity behind. Too many women, she realized, left this world having never been heard in full. She wouldn't be one of them. The letter wasn't long. It was honest, and it was folded carefully, sealed in an envelope tucked inside a drawer labeled simply, "For my children." It read, "To Maribel, Lucia, and Pio. You three are the most sacred chapters of my life. Thank you for forgiving me when I was only surviving. Thank you for growing even in the cracks. I know I wasn't always easy to love in those hard seasons, but you did. You stayed, and you taught me how to stay too. Please don't be afraid to tell your own stories, not the polished ones, the real ones. Be kind to your future. Be unafraid of joy. And if love ever knocks softly again, don't close the door just because you're used to the silence." I've learned that sometimes grace returns, wearing a familiar smile. She signed it simply, "With all my voice, Mom." She placed the envelope back into the drawer and ran her fingers across a stack of others, letters from women who had trusted her with their pain, poems from students, and one recent note from Alan, still folded in the envelope he'd handed her after their panel talk. She hadn't opened it yet, not because she didn't want to, but because she already knew what it would say. That night, she knelt by her bed, rosary in hand. She thanked the Blessed Mother not for the answers, but for the courage to live through the questions. She didn't need to know where the next chapter would lead. She just needed to show up for it. Chapter 33. Epilogue, Grace and Grit. Not everything broken stays that way. Some things are rebuilt stronger, softer, but stronger. The cafe buzzed with soft music and quiet conversation. Near the window, Luisa sat at a small round table with a notebook, a pen, and a half-finished cup of salabat. She was waiting, not nervously, not like the first time she waited for Romy all those years ago, holding her breath for a version of him that never came. This time she was just present. A little girl passed her table and stared at her. "Are you the lady from the book?" the girl asked, pointing to a flyer tacked near the entrance. "Stories That Saved Us. Author reading today at 3 p.m. Luisa smiled. "Yes, I guess I am." The girl nodded solemnly. "My mom read your book. She said it made her brave." Luisa leaned forward gently. "Then your mom is the real story." Alan arrived just after 3, carrying a folder under one arm and 2 drinks in his hand. One for her, exactly how she liked it. Half chamomile, half ginger, no sugar. "I hope I'm not late," he said. "I passed a bookstore and got stuck signing your copies." Luisa rolled her eyes but smiled. They sat without rush, like old friends who had survived different wars and found each other after the noise. He didn't reach for her hand, not yet, but when their fingers brushed slightly as they passed a pen, neither of them pulled away. Later, after the reading, a woman in the back stood up to speak. "Thank you," she said, voice trembling. "For telling the truth, we were too afraid to write. You gave us back our voices." Luisa looked around the room, women, daughters, a few husbands, a few sons. Some wiped tears, some held their breath. And then she looked at Alan. He didn't say anything. He just looked at her like she had already done more than enough. As the last guest left and the sun filtered in through the glass, Alan stood beside her. "You were brilliant," he said, "but I already knew that." Luisa looked down, then back up. "I don't know what this is," she said, echoing her own words from that long-ago dinner. "But I'm not afraid of it anymore." He smiled. "I've been here the whole time." She nodded. "And I think I'm finally ready to open the door." They didn't kiss. They just stood together, facing the light. Because sometimes, the most powerful kind of love doesn't demand a grand entrance. It arrives quietly when your hands are full of purpose and your heart no longer needs rescuing. It doesn't fix you, it sees you. And as Luisa stepped out into the sunlight, hand gently brushing his, her voice, so long silenced, was finally her own. Not loud, but unshakable. The End, a novel by E. Knoll.